Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a fun trunk show video where I am going to be showing 14 different quilts, and I've received a lot of these quilts from you guys. Actually, all of them from you guys. A few months ago I had let you know that I was going to be donating quilts to a safe house that's opening locally, and when I shared that video I was initially just looking for quilt pattern ideas, so I would have just a wide variety of quilt patterns that I could work from. And I not only got that video has so many wonderful pattern suggestions. In fact, if you are looking for quick to make quilts for charity events, or maybe you have a new little one arriving into your family and you just want to make something quickly, that video has so many great pattern suggestions. So I have that video linked in the description box below if you want to reference that at any point in time. It's a wonderful wealth of information. So in addition to receiving so many suggestions for those quick to make quilts, I also got some wonderful donations, quilt tops, and even completed quilts from you that I will be donating to this safe house as well. And so this video is just made up of all of those quilts that I got from you guys, and I am so thankful. I wanted to make the video to show the quilts. I know some of you are interested in that, but also to thank those that sent those quilt tops in. If you foresee that you would be interested in donating a quilt top at some point in the future, you are welcome to email me. I will tell you right now, I don't need any more quilt tops, but I do foresee this being an ongoing project, so it's very possible that 6 months, a year from now, I might be in need of quilt tops again. So I have my email below. If you want to reach out, feel free to do so. And again, just a thank you to everything that I have here. You can't see what I have. I've got stacks of quilts behind me, stacks of quilts here on my cutting table, and we're just gonna dive into this trunk show. These first two quilts that I'm sharing with you were sent in by Phyllis, and she sent them completed. So she had them all quilted and bound and ready to go. Unlike my usual trunk shows, I am not going to know the quilting name information if it's done digitally. This one I believe Phyllis quilted. I don't know if this is freehand or if she had a quilting pantograph that she was working off, so I'm not going to know that information. I'll still go ahead and show the quilting up close and kind of chat about it like I usually do, just so that you can see that. But just a really pretty blue and red, white, and blue quilt that we have here. Here you can see the quilting on this first quilt a little better. It's a stipple and then a star quilting motif that Phyllis has quilted on this quilt. And then for the backing, it's this marbled blue backing. She did a scrappy binding, which I always think is so pretty. Now behind me, I have the second quilt that Phyllis sent in for me. And I think this is so fun with the ombre effect here across this quilt. I think this is one that my daughter really spotted. She always loves the quilts that have those pretty kind of ocean blue colors. So we'll look at the quilting on this one too. It's a really pretty sort of loop-de-loo, spirally kind of design. All right, here you can see the loop-de-loops and spirals that I was talking about. You can probably see those pretty ombre fabrics a little bit better too. And then actually she quilted a little design in the borders here, and each one she treated just a little bit differently. The backing is that same marbly blue backing that she used on the previous quilt. So that's a peek at that quilt. Now, moving behind me, we have another quilt. This one was donated by Chris, and she used some of my Buttercup and Slate fabrics, which I thought was really fun to see when this one arrived in the mail. I especially like that she used that sketchy print for her background. I think that's such a nice choice. And this one, she sent in the quilt top, but then she also sent in backing and binding fabrics as well. So I sent this one out to be quilted, and my quilter, David Hurd, did the quilting on this one, and we'll take a look at that. This is the up close of Chris's quilt. The quilting on this one is a little bit hard to see, but it is these little spirals here, and then no, it almost looks like little butterflies or little ribbons kind of spread throughout. I tried to see if I could see the quilting design better on the back, but I can't even see it that well on the back. But you can definitely see the backing fabric that Chris chose, and then the little honeycomb print also from Buttercup and Slate. So I thought that turned out really pretty. I'm so happy for that donation. Now behind me, I have a quilt sent in by Lisa. Just a happy chevron sort of design in those pretty purples and blues. And the binding is super cute. We'll take a look at that when we're looking at the quilting as well. Here's Lisa's quilt up close. The quilting on this is almost the same as the diagonal plaid quilting design, but I don't think it's quite the same, but it's very similar to that quilting design. Let me flip it to the back. I love the back on this one. That stripe is so striking. I don't think I have ever used a stripe for a backing, but after seeing this quilt, it makes me want to try it. I just think that looks so pretty. And then the tag, I'm always horrible at making labels for my quilts, so that was fun to see. And then of course the gingham for the binding is so pretty. So behind me, I have a quilt from Pam. Pam sent in a completed quilt for me, and it's this pretty pink and white quilt. These remind me of little hearts, which I think is just so cute. She quilted this one with hearts and little loop-de-loops in a really pretty pink thread that complements this quilt so nicely. Her backing is this super soft pink gingham, and then a little polka dot print for the binding. And oh, let me get that label in the shot. A cute little label on this one too. The next quilt behind me was donated by Janet. She donated the quilt top, and then I supplied the backing and had the quilting done and chose binding from my stash. And actually, the remaining quilts that I'm sharing were all done that same way. I received the quilt tops and then finished them so that they are ready to donate. All of the quilting on the remaining quilts was done by my quilter, David Hurd, and I will have his information linked below should you want him to do any quilting for you. So we'll take a look at the quilting here on this one. A peek at this quilt up close. These are fun little string blocks, and this quilting design always reminds me of a topographic map. Topographic? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I'm sure you guys will let me know which way that is. So will my husband, because he works with those maps all the time. Maybe he'll just tell me which way is it, topographic or topographic. He's nodding. Topographic is the right way to say that. So this quilting design reminds me of those maps. I'm going to slide it over here so that you can see the border. This really pretty purple border gives this such a nice pop of color. I chose a gingham from Apricot and Ash for the binding on this one. For all of the quilts that I received, just the quilt top, I decided to use a minky type backing for these, so they are very nice and soft. This one is Fireside by Moda. You can really see that quilting design. It shows up so nicely on the back of this. Janet sent me a second quilt, and it's this quilt here. And this is a happy, fun, bright quilt, isn't it? I think this turned out so cute. And David chose such a great daisy floral design for the quilting. You can see those cute little daisies a little bit better now. I think they complement the fabrics so nicely. Janet did send binding fabric for this quilt, so it matches the sashing fabric that she chose, which looks to be a basic gray grunge fabric. And then for the backing, another minky. And again, you can see that nice quilting design here. Behind me, this quilt top was sent in by Carol, and it's just a really pretty, colorful design, somewhat similar in design to the heart quilt that I showed you earlier. At least I'm calling that a heart quilt because it reminds me of hearts, but just a little bit different. And let's take a look at that quilting. We have another flower design for the quilting on this one. Again, that just really complements those fabrics very nicely. For my binding, I had this little ticking stripe in my stash, so I pulled that. I believe that is from my Canning Day line of fabric. And for the backing, this is the same Fireside fabric that I used on one of the earlier quilts. And quilting always shows up so nicely on a minky type fabric. Behind me, we have another quilt from Carol. Carol actually sent in 4 different quilt tops. So the first one that you saw, this one that we just looked at, the quilting, And then we have this one plus one more, but just another pretty quilt in the blacks and the greens and those burgundies. The quilting on this is a little bit different than what we've seen, so let's look at that. Now, I misspoke just a moment ago. This is the second quilt that Carol sent, plus that pretty pink and aqua one right before, but not the one right before that. So we have, this is the second quilt, and then plus two more I'll be showing from Carol. So you can see the quilting on this. It shows up really nicely on these dark fabrics, and it's sort of almost like a spirally, not quite a feather, little stem sort of design. I think I'm really bad at describing quilting designs. Luckily, you can see what it looks like right here. And you'll be able to see it also nicely on the back, but you can see it really well right here on this black fabric that shows up so nicely there. So you can get a really good idea of the quilting here. For my binding fabric, this is a little sneak peek that you guys are getting of something coming soon that you haven't seen yet. So if you like the looks of that, keep an eye on some things that I'm going to be sharing in the upcoming weeks. But this little star fabric on black, and then here you can see that pretty quilting design. Again, a minky backing. I just think that's such a fun. It reminds me of blowing leaves. Whenever I see this sort of quilting, it reminds me of wind. So that's always what I think of when I see these sort of swoops and loops and spirals. Okay. The next quilt we have is this little pretty guy back here. I like these fabrics. You might be surprised to know that when I first started quilting, these were very much the sort of fabrics that I used, and enjoyed them, still enjoy them, and love seeing quilts made with this sort of fabrics. So let's look at that one up close. The quilting on this one is little circles, kind of a happy quilting design. You can see it really nice here on the black. For the binding, I chose, it's the same gingham that I mentioned earlier, but this time in gray rather than green, and that's from Apricot and Ash. And then the backing is that same Fireside fabric. So that is going to be a nice snuggly quilt. And this is the last quilt top that Carol sent in. And I thought this one was so pretty. I'm always very much drawn to French General fabrics. I don't know that all of the fabrics in this quilt are French General, but there are quite a few in here that are. And I just always think they make for such a pretty quilt. David quilted this one using a swirling and floral motif. You can see a little bit of the flowers here on the red. For the binding on this one, I have a lot of French General fabrics in my stash. I just love them. And so I chose a scrappy French General binding, which I think is so pretty. I love a scrappy binding, and I think that just complements this quilt top so nicely. So there's the back. You can see that quilting design better. Again, that Fireside minky type fabric. I used this fabric for almost all of the backings on these quilts. It's a nice neutral shade. I don't know the name of it offhand, but I'm going to look that up for you and make sure and list that down below in the description box. So if you're looking for just a nice neutral white-ish shade, it's not a stark white, it's kind of a creamy color. It works really well with a lot of different fabrics. So I just bought several bolts of this fabric to use for these backings. This next quilt top behind me was sent in by Monica, and the last three quilts that we're going to be looking at here were sent by Monica. So this is the first of the three, this pretty springy green and then little flower pot fabric makes for a really happy quilt. For the quilting on this one, David did a loop design and then these little flowers spread out and about. The sashing on this is such a nice choice with that little polka dot. It gives a little bit of movement to the quilt top without adding a lot of extra print in all of that space. I think that was a really pretty choice. We have a nice border out here. I chose a gingham stripe fabric for the binding, and then that same Fireside minky for the backing. And you can just see how pretty that quilting is. So a nice springy quilt. So take a look at this and then look behind me here. We have kind of the same version of fabrics but in blue. So where we were just seeing purples and greens and yellows, we have little blue flower pots and watering cans. And it's fun to see these two quilts back to back because you can see the difference a colorway can make in your quilt fabric choices. So here you can see those fabrics up close, the blue colorway. We have kind of a stipple design with little berries spread throughout for the quilting. You'll be able to see that much better here on the back. I think that's cute. This binding is a green stripe. I think that perfectly finishes out this quilt. Up next, our final quilt, also from Monica, and it is this beautiful blue and yellow quilt. I know many quilters enjoy those bright blues and yellows that we see in fabric lines from time to time, and I think this just makes such a striking quilt. I love those hydrangeas. When we moved into our house, we had beautiful hydrangea plants, and I was not very good at keeping those alive. I always say that I can't keep flowers alive outside in my flower beds, and so that's why you see me using flowers when I design fabrics, because that's something that stays beautiful year-round. So we're going to take a look at our last quilt that I have to share with you today. You can see these beautiful yellows and blues up close. Such happy fabrics. It's just full of flowers. The binding on this one I chose the blue gingham from Peachy Keen, so that will be in fabric shops very soon. And then you've gotten used to seeing this Fireside fabric that I used for the backing, and you can see the quilting really nice. It's just a loopy spiral sort of quilting design that David shows on this one. And that is the last of the quilts that I am sharing today. I want to thank you all so much for those of you that sent in quilts. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed seeing the tops that I received, the completed quilts that I received, and now these are all going to be on their way to be donated to people that are really going to need them. So I thank you again. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you again next time.